Hello, everyone. So, I am doing this month's Sacred Sexuality presentation. I'm testing out my new podcasting microphone. If you haven't seen already, we are having a live podcast this Friday, the 27th at 9 p.m. Central Standard Time. Everybody can join. You don't have to be in any special subscription tier. It's open to anybody. We're going to be talking about AI in the world of magic. And so we're just going to kind of be bouncing some belief systems off of each other and some projections. So it should be a lot of fun. Hope to see you there. So I wanted to test out the mic today. So this month's Sacred Sexuality series, because we do have so much going on and we just had Paganacon, I kind of made it short and sweet. We are going to be talking about the dark goddesses. So let me pull up the PowerPoint if I can figure out how to do that today. All right, here we go. Perfect. Wow, that actually was seamless for me today. I'm impressed with myself. Okay, so the dark goddesses. Usually, when we talk about the darker goddesses in polytheistic systems, we are talking about African goddesses, Afro-Caribbean goddesses, the Orishas, voodoo queens. There are so many. And at the end of the presentation, I'll kind of go over a generalized list, but I wanted to focus on three today because this is our Sacred Sexuality series. This is everything to do with sex magic, the divine feminine, feminine practices. So I wanted to focus on Bridget, Pumbagira, and Lilith. Of course, the three fierce protectors, and we're talking about dark goddesses, right? So let's jump into it. So we're going to start with Lilith. And, again, what I'm going to do today, I didn't want to get too deep into any one of the goddesses. I wanted to give kind of like a general overview, just some FYIs about the goddesses, and then encourage you, like if one of them calls to you to maybe do some research on your own. I'm all about research, seeing if there's alignment there with that goddess and incorporating her into your practice. So in sexual magic, sacred sexual practices, you will hear the name Lilith over and over again. Now, a year ago, I think it's been almost, maybe not quite a year, when I started this series, I did talk about Lilith. I talked about Isis. There were very specific goddesses that I did do more of a deep dive in. Now, you can find those videos on our YouTube. You're just going to have to scroll back about, I don't know, at least 6 months, probably longer. But today, I wanted to mention Lilith again. She is one of the oldest goddesses. Oftentimes, she is also kind of lump summed with Ishtar. There were texts, the Gilgamesh texts back in 2000 BCE, that actually made it sound like this is the same entity, Ishtar and Lilith, which it very well could be. So I wanted to kind of point that out because a lot of times people in my practice will ask me, specifically when we're talking about correlating gods and goddesses, as an omnist, I do look for correlations. I am a fervent believer that Kali Ma and Saint Michael are the same energy. They go by different names and they are presented differently depending on your belief system. I do believe that Lilith and Ishtar could be the exact same energy, the exact same entity, just presented differently at different time periods in different parts of the world. So we know that Lilith is at least over 4,000 years old, probably older. We know that during Christianization, they tried to discredit her as a demon. We know that her name has been found in the Dead Sea Scrolls. This is all Googleable, by the way. She was known as the first wife of Adam, but she didn't want him, right? She was a rebel. Um, she was then, again, when Christianization was taking place, they needed to demonize some of these goddesses. So there was the what do we want to call it? The manipulation propaganda is really what it was. That she was harmful to children was this lore. They associated her with the serpent minions, saying that she eats babies, which is wild. But again, manipulation propaganda. This was huge during Christianization periods. She does represent the divine feminine in all of us. Um, her worship is sacred. It is part of the feminine mysteries. And really, back in the day, Lilith was really associated with birth and birthing. Many a pregnant woman, many a woman trying to conceive did make offering and a prayer to Lilith for assistance with fertility, with assistance with a safe, conception, a safe, pregnancy, a safe birthing process, a safe delivery process. And, back then, they didn't have the tech we have now. So, it was hit or miss sometimes with, there being issues with delivery. So she was like, I would say the number one goddess when it comes to fertility magic, pregnancies, conception, things of this nature. She's also associated, as you know, with owls. Um, Again, there is that shape shifting quality about the owl and about the correlation to Lilith with the owl. It is a bird of prey, the wings, oftentimes, in old art, she is depicted with those wings. And again, there is that shape shifting quality to Lilith. And I think that a lot of us who work with her in sacred sexuality, she acts as a mirror. And we oftentimes do use actual mirrors because this is a way to shape shift. Very well used in love magic. I mean, I don't know very many older love spells that do not solicit a dark goddess like Lilith. Using makeup, cosmetics, that's actually Lilith's wheelhouse as well. Um, a lot of her older spells and practices do involve enchanting objects, enchanting ourselves, kind of like creating facades. And so makeup, there are a lot of spells out there using cosmetics, invoking Lilith, petitioning Lilith to enchant those cosmetics for a glamour or love drawing effect. Now, as I said, the Christians, they did smash up all her temples. Most of her relics were destroyed, which really sucks because historically there is so much damage done. We have bits and pieces here and there that can connect back to these deities. But the big stuff, the Christians really kind of, and I'm not beating on Christians at all. It's just the older school Christians, when it was more of like a pirate thing, they were very destructive. Nothing was saved, everything was destroyed. It just wanted to be, buried and forgotten. There was a point where the Jewish had started to reclaim her in some of their old sacred texts. So that's a very interesting, I think, thing that a lot of people don't know about Lilith work. So something to look into if you're interested in working with Lilith. There's a rich history here. Um, some of the items that I like to use when I am working with Lilith in a sacred sex practice, whether it's sex magic, glamour magic, love magic, if I am doing self love, if it's some sort of confidence, in line with glamour, some of the things I would like to use as an offering or to make or formulate oils or compounds are apples, of course, red roses, mugwort, and of course, you guys know I use mugwort in almost everything, jasmine, orchids, patchouli, musk, especially in lust and sex works. Musk is, you need it. It's almost a definitive in every single recipe. And it is very correlated to Lilith work. Pomegranate seeds, vanilla, myrrh, wormwood, cinnamon. So these are some of the main ingredients I will use to make a Lilith oil, a Lilith compound, anything that I'm going to use as an offering or a solicitation device or in a glamour or love working or a shape shifting working. If I am working an awareness or exposure case, I may use something like this, some sort of compound like this, soliciting Lilith for assistance with exposure. So here are some of my um, more favorite representations of Lilith. This is actually Ishtar. And again, included Ishtar because there are a lot of groups who do believe that Ishtar and Lilith are the same being, the same entity. Again, just something, to research on your own and come to your own conclusion on. So let's talk about Mama Bridget. First of all, let's talk about this amazing. I was so happy I found something online because it's so much easier to find something versus try to create it in my little paint workshop thing on my desktop. But Mama Bridget if you have ever been to New Orleans, she is huge. She is like the NOLA voodoo queen, right? And I love NOLA. I'm going to be going back there in May for SassyCon. I was there for Hex convention, not this last August, but the previous August. And just, I've been down there for Mardi Gras pre-Katrina. So, I mean, it's just a beautiful area. I love the French Quarter. I love St. Louis Cemetery #1. We're going to talk about that a little bit today. But this is a very good diagram right here on what an altar for Mama Bridget would look like. All of the different incorporations that you would have. So I wanted to make sure I included this for you because I just thought whoever did this did such a great job, really kind of including everything and making it very visual. So let's talk about her a little bit and what I love about her. So she is Haitian, right? She is a Haitian goddess. And in New Orleans, there is kind of like a Nola Haitian flair to this particular deity. But again, sacred feminine work, very maternal. You know, I don't know if I would put the label maternal on Lilith. I think there are divine feminine qualities, but I wouldn't necessarily label them maternal. With Mama Bridget, they are very maternal. She is like everyone's grand ancestor. She is like everyone's grandmother, right? It is a very deep maternal feeling working with her. So, she is associated to the sacred energy of every first female buried in every cemetery. So, when you walk into a cemetery, it'd be kind of hard to walk around and find the oldest tombstone there. Maybe if you did some research beforehand, because that could be very time consuming. But if you can find the first female buried in that cemetery, that is an access point to working with Mama Bridget. She is associated with that location in each and every cemetery. Now, working with Mama Bridget is a little bit different than working with some of the other deities. I think one of the big differentiators here in sacred sexuality work and sex magic are the divine messages that are downloaded in working with her are very they're feelings. They're intuitive in nature. A lot of times we talk about sounds, words, action points. With her, it's very intuitive. It's a feeling. It's clear cognizance, it's a knowing, it's a feeling. I think that kind of sets her apart and it's very strong. You just know, like when she's present, when she's been invoked properly. There is a practice in NOLA where groups that do worship Mama Bridget and do regular services to her, they will actually put cotton balls in their mouth and mumble as they are invoking her. There is a special name for it. I couldn't remember what it was. It's been years. I mean, I haven't been to a Mama Bridget ritual since I want to say 2005. And so we're in 2026. So it has been 21 years, but there is a special name. If you know what it is, let me know because I was raking my memory trying to remember the name for that practice. But I specifically remember the cotton balls going in the mouth and that person who was being ritually possessed, kind of mumbling. And it was supposed to be the invocation of Mama Bridget and her communicating. So it's a very interesting ritual possession practice, which sets Mama Bridget apart. Very primal energy with this particular deity. She is the champion of abused women and abused children. Honestly, she really is. If you are looking for justice, if you are a marginalized person also looking for justice, she is the deity I would connect with as soon as humanly possible. So, there's a couple of things that I just really love with the Mama Bridget practice, and that is flags. And I'm going to show you some pictures on the next slide, but oftentimes with these loa, there are flags. These flags are like living objects of offering and devotion. And so they're like living depositories, I guess is a good way to call them. All of the loa usually have a flag dedication. With Mama Bridget's, typically what you'll see are a lot of roses, skulls, hearts, cemetery scenes, real moss, not painted acrylic moss, but real moss, Real hot peppers. Now, the interesting thing with hot peppers, you definitely want to incorporate those in your flags. Once those hot peppers dry out, you do need to replace them. That is part of feeding that flag, feeding that living devotional item, that offering, that devotion to this specific deity. It's very important because if you let the peppers just kind of rot there, it's disrespectful, right? So it's something that if you were going to do flag work, you would want to make sure that you were on top of. When we do offerings to Mama Bridget, it is to ask for help. It is to ask for assistance and guidance, but we really don't have like a specific petition. We're not asking, hey, I need to know what the Powerball numbers are Friday night at 9 p.m. Or hey, I need John Doe to fall in love with me this Saturday at this special event I'm going to. We don't really attach specific manifest qualities or specific targets to the offerings that we're asking assistance with. Instead, we would say something like, hey, I would really like for some open roads and open doors for abundance and prosperity, especially monetarily. Or, hey, I am really drawing in a romantic or sexual based love partnership. Can you assist me with opening some roads and doors for acquiring that, for achieving that, for manifesting that? So we kind of keep it open. Offerings that you're going to find with Mama Bridget: willow, coffee, of course, cigarettes, of course, which is very common with the dark goddesses, and purple candles. She is oftentimes referenced as the queen of the named and the unnamed dead. Um, Oftentimes you'll hear the statement, the dead are underneath her, and that's quite literal. Like she is almost like the gatekeeper, right, for the dead in this belief system. She is kind of like the bridge. One thing too that I find just very awesome about Mama Bridget and the entire practice, especially from the New Orleans aspect, because that's what I'm familiar with is the NOLA practice, is sex and humor are both associated to death. And rightfully so. They're both very transformative. During rituals, you will see, like I said earlier, this ritual possession take place. Sometimes it's the cotton balls in the mouth. There's mumbling. That's more of a serious kind of communicating that's taking place. But a lot of times you'll see what we call under the influence, ritual possessed individuals. And so they're going to be funny. They're going to be kind of, falling around like maybe they're intoxicated. It is the intoxication of spirit, the intoxication of absorbing the energy of Mama Bridget. So, sex and humor, very common, very associated to that ritual possession process with her. And I have a couple more slides here with her as well. So, these are the flags, some examples of the flags that I was talking about earlier. I think these are beautiful representations. I found these, there's a woman on Etsy who actually makes these, and Etsy pisses me off because of the bullshit I went through with them, but there's still some amazing, amazing practitioners on Etsy, and I still want to support them fully. Also, cemeteries. Here are some sample photos I wanted to include. These are, I do believe, from St. Louis Cemetery number one. I have been there. It's a beautiful, NOLA has some of the most beautiful cemeteries in the world. The only other place I've been to where I've seen equally beautiful cemeteries is Belize. I went to Central America. I want to say that was back in uh early 2000s, mid 2000s. I know it had to have been before 2010 or maybe right around 2010. And as we were going through Belize, it's in Central America, we were working our way towards the Honduras border. There were these beautiful cemeteries, very similar to the ones that you would find in NOLA. And it's very common to see cemeteries with very specific, tombs, grave sites with the triple X's, with the offerings, with the telltale signs of, ritual work, solicitation, offering. And again, if you are working with Mama Bridget, you would probably be doing that at the site of the first female buried or, relocated to that particular cemetery because that is her access point. So let's talk about VVs. And I have a whole slide full of these, and I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly because I've been with a couple of different people who are Mama Bridget practitioners that pronounce it a little bit differently than I do. I pronounce it VVs. If I'm saying it wrong, I apologize. I'm Midwestern. It's just the way that I talk. But these are ground drawings, another practice of Mama Bridget's that I find beautiful, because it is so artistic, it's so unique. But these ground drawings, and I'm going to show you some examples, they're done in coffee and sometimes cornmeal. They're usually double-handed, so you're using both hands to make the designs. And that is because you want to represent one as the visible world and the other as the invisible of the world, because we really do manifest in both what is seen and what cannot be seen, right? Once these designs, these ground drawings are complete, you dance on them barefoot. While you are doing that, you are absorbing the energy as a vessel. You are a vessel absorbing the energy of that creation, that connection to Mama Bridget. Again, I have seen in NOLA, again, this is back in, I want to say around 2005 was the last ritual I attended, but I have seen ritual possession even during VV dancing. Oftentimes, these VVs you will see for Mama Bridget specifically the letter R's, hearts, Bridget's cross, little tiny crosses, and coffins. Very common in her VV drawings. One of the things too that I love about Mama Bridget is if you incorporate her into your sacred sexuality practice, into your sex magic practices, you come to, I think, understand more that magic is kind of like an in-between place, like a bridge between the visible and the invisible. And sometimes it's hard to, because we have to live in this world, we have to function in this world. It can be very difficult to find that bridge and keep that bridge intact. I think Mama Bridget does a wonderful job of making it easier for us to cross that bridge and keep that bridge intact and not lose ourselves in the day to day, doldrums of having to function in a society of just the visible, right? She brings the invisible to us very easily. Other things with Mama Bridget. So a lot of you are familiar with mojo bags, gree-grees. We use that in sex magic practices. We use that in a lot of different practices. But the interesting differentiator here with Mama Bridget is that these gree-grees, these mojo bags, they're really prayers to the ancestors. They're thank yous to the ancestors for their help, for their guidance. Whereas a lot of times in other practices, it's for drawing money, drawing abundance, drawing love. They're very, marriage. They're very attached to a very specific intention. With Mama Bridget, it's a thank you. It's a thank you for your guidance. Thank you for your wisdom. Thank you for your help. Thank you for closing doors. Thank you for opening doors, right? Very commonly in these bags, you are going to find willow and aspirin. Isn't that interesting? But not Tylenol. Don't use Tylenol. They're usually made of natural cloth. Sometimes they are carried, sometimes they are left as offerings at that first female buried in each cemetery. Whatever is in there, typically they are biodegradable items. And that is because they are a lot of times being left in cemeteries at grave sites. And so everything in there needs to be biodegradable. And that's also in line with Mama Bridget's practice. Now, with Mama Bridget, again, she has Haitian roots. She's Nolalized New Orleans. She has a New Orleans flair to her. This practice and these deities in it, it started around 401 deities. I think they're at 1,001 deities now. It is always changing. It is over 2,500 years old, not quite as old as Lilith, but almost. And we have data, we have artifacts, relics dating back to 400 BC, specifically regarding Mama Bridget. So this is a very, a lot of people think that this is kind of like that Nola Flash deity work. It's not. There is history here. Just do a Google search, right? And always verify your Google, information, but do a Google search. This is in just the last couple of hundred years, last 200 or so years, has become a religion of enslaved people. But originally, that's not what it was. But it has become that. So it's just kind of another interesting differentiator. And here's an example of a really nice mojo bag or a gree here. So let me show you some VVs. Oh, I love these. So just so you know, this icon here that I have plastered all over, that is Mama Bridgette's sigil, right? It is her symbol. So if we look at some of these examples, we have, this one up here, you can very much see that that is Mama Bridgette's symbol right there. Um, Here are some beautiful kind of like they definitely Mama Bridgette's in there, but there's some additional flavor in these. But look at these. These are just absolutely beautiful. And look at this one right in the middle. This is a beautiful, very full ritual offering Vivi. So they're probably going to be doing a lot of dancing, a lot of ritual possession. Let me move myself out of the way. Here's a huge indoor one. I think indoor ones work just as well as outdoor ones. You're going to absorb that energy regardless if you're outside in the dirt or if you're inside on concrete. This is spiritual energy. Those things really don't matter, right? It's just another form of energy it works through. But you have some small ones. You have these huge ones. But I wanted to show you an example of what VVs look like. I think they're very powerful. I think they combine not only dark goddess work and sacred sexuality work, but they also combine, that transformation of Plutonian work. Pluto. It is, I think, very transformative no matter how you're practicing it. But in sex magic, I will tell you, I have seen these designs created on bed sheets. I think that um, you definitely are soliciting and doing offering. Is it the same? Energetically, I think because we're not using the coffee and the cornmeal and because we're not kind of kicking up those elements, it might not be as potent, but I still think there's potency there if you wanted to do a Mama Bridgette bed sheet for a sex magic practice with a partner or solo. I am aware of several of my clients using those. So, and it works for them. All right, Pumbaa Gira. Let me take a drink here. I'm thirsty. I love Pumbaa Gira. I do involve her in one very specific sexual magic rite that I perform each year. Here are some really nice representations of her. There's all sorts of different representations of her depending on what part of the world you're in. But let's get into it. Pumbaa, very Brazilian. She is part of we call it the Umbanda pantheon, if you're familiar with that. Very big in Rio de Janeiro. Uh, you know, I would say all of South America, but definitely not just South America, but very heavy there. She is a deity of blending, of fluidity. There's a lot of cultural. Again, I think of hoodoo, I think of omnism, polytheism, where we're kind of hodgepodging stuff together like we do in Conjure. She's an Orisha, she's an entity, she's energy. Some people worship her as pure energy without the aesthetic. So, Pumbaa, in essence, is a patron deity to sex workers, to sacred prostitutes, to exotic dancers. Oftentimes, in these establishments, especially if you're in Mexico, Central America, South America, you will see her statuary and you will see dollar bills or other forms of currency attached to that statuary as offering for her continued support, right? Brazil is kind of like a melting pot of spiritual belief systems anyway, deity systems. It really is. And not just with deities, but I think with people in general, it's just a melting pot. We talk about America being that way. I think Brazil is very much that way. Um, Her crossroads are very sacred. So crossroads work with Pumbaa is huge. And hers is the T crossroad. So I put a representation of that right there. Very different, because it's the T stop versus the full, cross, I guess. Um, the energy here is sacred with Pumbaa. She is associated with the number three. Three is a sacred number. If you are not part of my numerology series, this is a great time to join. The subscription tier is the $5 tier. So for $5 a month, you can be part of that. I just did number two. Next month, the month of April, is number three. And to actually add upon that, if you go to our YouTube and you scroll back again, You're going to be scrolling back at least 6, 7, 8 months. But when I first started the Sacred Sexuality series, I think it was maybe the third or fourth month in, I actually broke down the numbers and the letters associated with the sex magic practice. So you can check that out. But her skirts are also very prominent in terms of some of the wordage that we use in the sacred text with her. So the spinning world, the turning on the access point, those are actually her skirts, are representative of her skirts and the sensuality in the practice. It kind of keeps it going, it keeps it spinning. Part of that actually spans back to Romani beliefs as well. So those of you that have the Eastern European practice, that would be your Romani version of Pumbaa Gira. Same thing, big skirts, representative of keeping the world spinning, turning on its axis. And a lot of times in sacred sexuality, that was sacred prostitution. Those women were the ones that were considered to be able to keep the world going, spinning around. So very interesting kind of tidbit if you're going to work with her. But the recipe for her blessing water for opening roads, opening doors, for justice work is going to be spring water. It's going to be Abre Camino, sage, tobacco, basil, carnation, peonies, and then, of course, just like the other dark goddesses, her offerings typically are, some form of tobacco, cigarette, or herbal smoke. And I think I did include another slide. I did. I had one more slide here for her. So this is actually an example of the statue that I have of Pumbaa Gira on my altar. Some of you may have seen it if you've had me do any sort of root work or elemental casting or puppetry for you. But the other thing associated with her that kind of differentiates her, it sets her apart, is Pemba, which is magic chalk, right? Usually her chalk is going to be red or black. And typically with all the Orisha, you're going to match color for that Orisha, but all of them are loaded with different types of herbs, compounds associated with that deity. And then that sacred chalk is used to draw their symbols on cloth, drums, on the ground. Again, her colors are typically red and black. And you'll also notice with some of her symbols, not just the big flowing skirts to represent the spinning of the world by sex workers, but those lusty horn divinities, right? The lust horns. So that is very associated with her as well. Back in the day, I would say at least 5 or 6 years ago, I actually used to make pemba, which is herbal compound loaded chalk for very, very specific intents. And I did that for some time, but it is very time consuming. If this is something you enjoy, I would definitely, it's very easy to make chalk. It's not hard at all. The hardest part probably is making your herbal compound and getting it to set before you load it. But I find it to be a very, very effective magical tool. So give it a shot if you are like a crafty person for sure. All right, some of the other dark goddesses that we did not cover. I wanted to focus just on the three main ones for the Sacred Sexuality series, but here is a list right here on the left. Of course, Lilith is on there. But you see Oya. Oya is another one that I work with very closely. Freya's on here. The Morrigan, obviously, but go through the list. If there are any of these deities that kind of jump out at you as ones that you would like to learn more about or incorporate into the sacred sexuality practice, you can shoot me a private message. I can make sure to include them in the next series update for you. But again, just kind of as a reminder, working with these goddesses is about embracing self. It's about fighting, advocating, and reclaiming power. And we do that through the sacred sexual practice. The shortest path is not always going to be a straight line. There's always more than one way to get somewhere. And sometimes, we do have to go another way, and that will change your life. You have to go the long way around sometimes. And building bridges with these particular goddesses can be very beneficial in taking the long way around. A couple of places I wanted to mention that I think if you have the opportunity to visit, are very spiritual, that really can help oomph up your practice with the dark goddesses, are, of course, the Benin markets in Africa and the voodoo markets in Mexico. Google them, research them. If you are a spiritual traveler like I am, these are places you definitely want to check out at some point. All right, and then of course my favorite depictions of Lilith here. These are probably two of my favorite depictions of her. I don't know why I included it here and not in the beginning, but there you go. And here we are. We have our Patreon QR code on the left and the main website on the right. And as always, I want to thank you for all of your support. And if you have